Good morning.
Oh, yeah, she does.
Okay, good afternoon, or actually it's still morning, isn't it? Good morning. It is Monday, June 14th. It's 11:03, and this is a briefing meeting, and the focus of this briefing meeting will be to have an in-depth discussion on our selections or our preferences on the interim superintendent. And we have Mr. Scott Cashman here, and he will be facilitating. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cashman to go ahead and start the meeting for us.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here as we go through the rankings for our interim superintendent finalists. So what I'll do this morning is I'll share the rankings as determined by the points each of you shared in the ranking rubric, and we'll post that in just a moment. I'll go through each board member's preference, then we'll open it up to discussion, and then I'll ask for a verbal consensus. So with that, if I could have Mrs. Tortosa, if you could display the rankings on the screen, and I'll read through each one of them first. So as each of you know, we had two finalists interviewed last week. We had Dr. Vicki Cartwright and Dr. Kenneth Savage. So in alphabetical order, I'll read each board member's top choice by points earned. First was Miss Fisher. Her top choice was Dr. Kenneth Savage.
Excuse me, Mr. Cashman, it doesn't look like the rankings are on the board, and it looks like Ms. Tortosa Ursley is having some technical difficulties.
I have it up, it's just not projecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
There it is. Going? Okay. Starting over, we have Miss Fisher. Her top choice is Dr. Kenneth Savage. Mrs. Giovanelli's top choice, Dr. Kenneth Savage. Mrs. Gittens' top choice, Dr. Kenneth Savage. Mrs. Jordan's top choice, Dr. Kenneth Savage. I'm sorry, Miss Jordan's top choice, Dr. Kenneth Savage. Mrs. Morgan's top choice, Dr. Cartwright. Mrs. Patrica's top choice, Dr. Cartwright. And Miss Vaughn's top choice, Dr. Kenneth Savage. So we have two board members who have Dr. Vicki Cartwright as their top choice, and we have 5 board members who have Dr. Kenneth Savage as their top choice based on points earned. So in the ranking form, you'll see each board member has either a 1 or 2 below them, and that number 1 shows their preference in the candidate, number 2 was their second choice, again by points earned. So first I want to see, are there any questions before we have discussion? So you'll see here we do have a consensus in terms of the number of board members who have preference for one candidate over the other with a 5-2. So any questions? First Mrs. Gittens and then Mrs. Giovanelli.
Okay, I was a little confused as to our process, and I know it was brought up at the last meeting as to how we did our Attorney Dupree Bruno. And my understanding was that when we did this part of the process, then we moved forward with the person that was in the top, and that person, the next meeting was who we voted for. Can you make sure we're understanding, has that changed? Or isn't that what we should be doing today?
So the process, and Attorney Dupree Bruno, you can weigh in as well. The process we'll be following today is this morning. I'll share the rankings as I've just done, and you see that there's consensus based on points earned. I'll then open it to discussion from each of the board members to discuss the rankings I've just shared. And then I'll ask Vice Chair if we could take a verbal vote of the board. Based on that consensus vote, you would then bring it to your meeting this evening for final approval. And my understanding is during the day, after this meeting, Attorney Dupree Bruno would work with the chosen finalist on their contract that would be shared this evening. Ms. Attorney Dupree Bruno, did I capture that correctly?
That's correct. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I just had a question. Besides yourself and I know the board secretaries, who else received our rankings?
The two people who received the rankings were me and Attorney Dupree Bruno. Anyone else, if you sent it to the assistants, would have just been if you sent it to the assistants. But the only two people who received these were me and Attorney Dupree Bruno. The only people who saw these rankings were me and Attorney Dupree Bruno, and I sent her a copy of those last night.
Great, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Any other questions on the rankings? If not, I'll open it up to discussion. Hearing none. Any discussion that you'd like to have? Mrs. Morgan.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand why I think it's important for people to understand why Dr. Cartwright came out on top for me. And I think there were four things that I took into consideration as I was going through the categories and I was trying to decide who was capable, who was more than capable, who was exceptional. So I want to share those with you. First was breadth of experience. While one candidate has had a lot of experience in this district, the other one has had considerable experience across a large organization, as well as a superintendent responsibility. And then type of leadership. One of the candidates, to me, starts from a position of analysis and works towards collaboration. The other candidate starts with collaboration and then supports it with analysis. Another point for me was the suggested approach that would be taken by these candidates during the turnaround. And it was very clear that Dr. Savage intends to make significant changes in a short period of time. And frankly, my ambition for the next 6 to 9 months is to give each department that has been through this past year, past 18 months, an opportunity to regroup. Academics is in the process of regrouping. In fact, Dr. Cartwright referred to tweaking. We have a plan. We know it works. We've learned a lot from COVID. We know that we can change the plan or we should change the plan because of the things that we've learned from COVID. So to me, the goal is really to give academic services this coming school year an opportunity to reboot and refresh the strategic plan given what we've learned and what we know. Same thing with, HR, finance. Those departments are in great shape, but there's a lot of work that both of those departments need to do, and I just don't think we need at this point to bring in somebody who's going to say, I'm going to make all kinds of changes at a time when we're trying to take, I think, a significant step forward with what we already have. I'm also concerned about the loss of the operations head. That's our weakest department. It is our least professionally staffed at this point. And what will happen when that person is removed, and what are we going to do to run that operation? So I have considerable concern about what we are signaling to the district and to the community. I was here when Burke came in, and in one year, he threw out an entire curriculum, math and language arts. We went from an A to a C district in a period of 2 years, which is not to suggest that that's what Dr. Savage would do. I'm just suggesting that abrupt change after what we've come through is deeply concerning to me. And while I appreciate that people want an internal candidate who knows everybody, I am convinced that Dr. Cartwright has the kind of personality that would blend very well with our leadership and with the community. And I understand that some people want change. I am concerned about using this particular appointment as an opportunity to affect change. So those are my thoughts going into this evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Gittens?
And I thank my colleague for her comments. And I am actually one that, if you'll recall, when we started down this process, that was adamant not to have someone internal. And I don't know if it's just I'm getting older or what, but I am learning to be, excuse me, more open-minded in looking at things. And I think I'm a very strategic and big picture thinker anyway. But as I have looked at this situation that we are in, some of the things that were stated, I think the opposite. And here's why I changed to thinking that we do need someone from internally. After listening to and watching the interviews, and I went back over them twice because I wanted to make sure before I did my numbers that I saw and heard and had captured everything I needed to do. And I sat there then with the rubric and actually changed some of the things that I had done previously. The examples that Dr. Savage gave were, real life examples for something that could be used in a $2 billion corporation and, 95,000 students. That comparison, and let me just say this, I didn't take from him that he's going to come in necessarily and just say, change this and change that. He has been in this system for a while, went away, got some experience somewhere else, and then came back. And I think that combined gives him the set of eyes to be able to see things that we can improve on. Change to people is a four-letter word, and I don't think that I didn't take that away as we're going to change this and we're going to change that. I took from it, here's how we can get better. Doing what we're doing currently, and as far as the 6 to 9 months, I still stand by my theory that anyone worth us having to run an organization of this size by the start of school the music will have stopped and they will find a place. And I think it's kind of out there to think that we can get someone in the middle of the year, because a professional superintendent will start the year, and of course they will want to see the year finish because that's their legacy. So to leave in the middle of a year to come here where we've got all the things rolling along and you can't make changes anyway, I think it's kind of pie in the sky to think that we'll get someone in the middle of the year that could fit our needs. The experience and what I saw in the interviews, I just felt like that changed my mind to think we do need someone. I've heard so many people say, well, we want someone to just keep things rolling. But you have to know what's rolling and how to do that. it will take a new person anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get up to speed on all this. So that's my thought and why I've made the decision and the change in my perspective that I did.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, thank you. So in looking at the interviews again and at my notes that I made during the group interview, I think that we have had a very difficult year, and I think that we have some situations in this district where we have key positions that are vacant. We have some people who work for us, staff and administrators, who were feeling uncertain and unsupported. I think we have 2 candidates who interviewed really well and had many strengths in common. And Dr. Savage earned the most points with me due to some of his ancillary experiences. He's been a law school student. He is vested in this community and has coached sports and knows the people. I had numerous emails and phone calls and ran into people who were advocating for him. That is, people in the district who have worked with him and for him, and people in the community who know him from his advocacy for public education here. So he earned some extra points along that time. I think that Dr. Savage is a strategic thinker, and he does know this district and this community, and I think that in lieu of making major changes, I think he might do some of what Dr. Cartwright might have called tweaking, because I think he sees some issues that need to be attended to. He sees some positions that need to be filled quickly, and especially in our finance department. He's aware of the personnel issues we have had and the exodus of people that we've had, largely due to the pandemic and to some of the requirements, which from the state level are always changing. I think our academic services department has done an amazing job, and they are prepared for next school year, but we're going to be adjusting to a new set of standards, and that includes the fact that we have a great amount of training to do with staff, because we may all hear what's coming down the pike, and our executive people know what it is and they're working on it. But the next step is to get the word to all of the people who have to implement those standards and do the work, the ones who are in the trenches. I think Dr. Savage has a keen handle on those people, and he has those relationships with people who are critical, like the transportation people, because he's had that experience in operations. He had a lot of experience in, like Dr. Cartwright, with research and development is really like his bailiwick. So I think he has the skill set necessary to make strategic plans or changes in support of our district strategic plan, which does need some adjustment as we move along with our growth. And we need a kind of a shot in the arm for our climate and culture, and I think that he can provide the leadership for that. And so that's why he's my top choice.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Other comments or discussion? Vice Chair Vaughn?
Okay, Dr. Savage was also my first choice. I was impressed with Dr. Cartwright's credentials in terms of her, let's say, her academic credentials, outstanding. But in looking at the background, even though when she was in a large Florida county, in Orange County, she was, quote, an assistant superintendent, that's a position that no longer exists. And in in looking back, I did a little research on it, in looking back, it may have been similar to what we might have as maybe a chief or an executive director, not a true superintendent. Like Ms. Gittens, my mind changed quite a bit as we've gone through the process. There were, frankly, a couple people that either weren't chosen by my colleagues that I thought had good credentials, or who, for whatever reason, dropped out of the process. And so I went from, no, I don't think I want to have somebody internal, to, wow, I really learned a lot about Ken Savage. Some of the things, I knew he had been for a short period of time in Tallahassee, and, knew about what he did with James Stevens. But some of the things that came out in his background, and also some of the roles he has taken academically, I had no idea. The lectures that he's given, and so his networking goes way beyond just Lee County. He knows people not only all over the state, but in the world of academia, that he has actually been chosen for prestigious presentations. Another thing that I think is really important, as I said, I knew about James Stevens, but I guess I really hadn't paid attention to the role that he played as a turnaround principal, the very successful job that he did. And as a district, and this is not taking away from Dr. Atkins, but I've heard people here on the board talk about, oh, we went from DA schools and schools that with Ds and threatening, those kinds of things, and now we have none. Well, Dr. Savage played an integral role in that, and I think he deserves credit on that. The other thing I found out in talking to him, and during my individual interview, and this really jumped out at me since math has never been my strong point. The man's a math whiz, and he talked about, as we discussed the budget area, he talked about data and how he looks at a budget, and I mean, he's very, very strong in the financial department, and talked about in his division, operations, he was able to, unlike some other areas, cut $1 million and save the district $1 million. So, and I know that he has proposed some reorganizational strategies that, for whatever reason, in cabinet were never really taken seriously. The other thing is, and I've got a lot of notes here, but the other thing is, I was impressed with the letter that he wrote along with his resume. And I think it goes to the point that this is a man who's going to tell the truth, even if, and I'm positive he knew there would be at least a couple board members that would perhaps argue with him or chew him out about, how can you say anything bad about our school district? Well, to me, nothing is ever perfect. And how do you make change, and how do you move ahead, and how do you fix the things that aren't working well, or maybe they're working fine, but they're not working on the level, and he even mentions of a world-class school district. And lots of things that he brought up in that letter and that we followed up on as I talked with him individually really rang true with me on things that need to be proved. As he said, we can't afford to twiddle our thumbs in bare maintenance for 6 to 9 months. We need to continue, especially following the pandemic, working to consistently, constantly improve ourselves. And finally, I'm trying to think, I don't know the number, but like was mentioned here already, everyone who wrote to me with an opinion said Dr. Savage would be their choice. But the ones that really stood out, there are 2 or 3 that really stood out, because some were just, I think it should be, he's, blah, blah. But there was an email, I guess we all got it, from Hannah, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Pell, from United Way, and she talked in glowing terms on projects that she worked on with Dr. Savage, and how he, community partnership school program at Franklin Park Elementary, and she mentioned the word brainstorming, and I love that, because this man, far and away, is more innovative and creative thinker than Dr. Cartwright, I feel. Not to take away from her academic credentials, but he is a creative and innovative thinker. Talks that they had an influence on the United Way School Resource Center that we now have. I heard from one of his former teachers, and actually through a teacher is how I first met him quite a few years ago, when I ran into, this is before I was even on the board, and I was, I think, a candidate, and this lady said to me, oh, you've got to come to our school. This man is such a great leader. Another teacher wrote about his outstanding leadership skills. She said, and I think this is really important considering this discussion and the gulf that we have, not just here on the board, but in terms of some of the leadership directions, I guess you could say. He brought the staff together with incredible grace, intelligence, and humor. I just think that we may have, I know I have, underestimated the man from what we see on the surface and the person who appears here and gives us answers to our agenda reviews, because I know when I really got to talk to him one-on-one for that, actually I think it wound up being 45 minutes, I learned an awful lot, and I've been very impressed and think he will be the person that we really need.
Thank you. Other comments or discussion? Gordon?
Thank you. I just want to say it was difficult for me because Dr. Cartwright, I felt that I loved her leadership in the ESE department, and I felt that that's something that to me is very, very important to us as a district, and making sure that all of our kids, and she mentioned that quite a few times, about all means all of our children. And I, she dealt with the shooting at a school. So there was a lot of stuff that she did have to, rise to the occasion and make sure that that all happened. But I do have to agree a lot with what my colleagues have said as well regarding Dr. Savage. And I feel that what I want to make sure of, I don't see any person, whomever that this person is, coming in here and being like a change agent, coming in and making all these changes, because we're trying to make sure that we keep, you know, coming up on the 21st, we're going to get this search firm, get them going, get a superintendent, hopefully, you know, sooner than later. So in the meantime, have a person who is going to have to gain the trust, because you have to have people trust you and be able to hear what they have to say, and people will work for you. So I think that that's something that that has to be maybe recreated. Also, as far as a turnaround principal, he was a turnaround principal, which was great. And the thing is, with our team, prior to him becoming that person, they had the hindsight of who that person would be to make that happen. And Dr. Savage was that person who was able to do that, just as we do at the other schools. So he having that ability to already have been that person can see where we may need other people like him to go into, like our other turnaround leaders, to make sure our schools are where they need to be as well. So he does have a lot of, it was just really hard because we do know him, we do see what he does. You know, well, I feel like I see what he does on a day-to-day basis, and I see what he does in the community because I'm involved in a lot of those same things that he has participated in, as Ms. Vaughn spoke of, with the United Way, the wraparound schools. I mean, things that are really, really important to our community and our family district. So that's why I felt that he, and I know my numbers were very, very close. I didn't even realize until I looked at this that I picked one over the other. However, I do think that we need whomever this is that's going to come in, that's going to keep us moving forward, and work with our leadership that we already have here, and make sure that we are getting everything ready for that next, for the permanent superintendent when they come in, so they can hand the reins over and we can still continue to move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mrs. Gittens?
I just want to make sure that I don't think I said this previously too, that about Dr. Cartwright. I feel she is a very strong candidate and interviewed well, and I don't want to disparage her at all and what she has done and what her capabilities will be going forward. And I just wanted to make sure that I say that, and you know, say that I would have supported whoever the candidate would have been.
Thank you. Other comments, Ms. Patrica?
So yeah, I've got a lot to say in order to help my colleagues understand my thought process here. So from the very beginning, I have said that I was hoping to land in a position not just on the interim, but on the permanent, where all 7 of us could be thumb sideways. So when I left the group of interviews, I personally, Chris Patrica, was leaning toward Dr. Savage. I thought he was dynamic. I thought he was high energy. And I mean, frankly, he was fun, and he made me excited about potential big change for the future. And then I have to also say that I thought Dr. Cartwright was very capable, very qualified, just more businesslike and subdued in her presentation. So the notion of change can be like a really tantalizing hook, and I feel like he hooked me during that interview. And then I stopped and I thought, okay, this is where I get in trouble. This is not about what Chris wants. This is about what the board wants. This is about what the board has reached consensus on in terms of qualities, characteristics, length of term of service of an interim, and all of those things. So I looked back at some of our meetings, and one of the big things that we focused on as a group was process. And I believe that that process was meant to keep me in line, and meant to keep all of us in line so that we didn't focus on the high energy interviewee over the low energy interviewee. Instead, we looked at their characteristics, we looked at their qualifications, and we looked at what the board has decided that they want. So I put aside what Chris Patrica's impression was of the interviews, and I looked back on what we as a board have said that we want. And I'm going to read you a few quotes of what things we have said, we as board members have said. The functions of an interim superintendent are risk assessment, operations, finance, HR, the district strategic plan, which is in place. So maintenance of that plan, coordinating the work of the cabinet in the execution of that plan, managing the board and interacting with the community. Another quote, I want to see something that is not a board member of influence, more influence, calling up and going, hey, Susie, I think you should be superintendent. I'm going to call all my friends and have them write the board members and tell them I've worked with Susie or whatever. I don't think it should be done that way. I would be pushing for it not to be an heir apparent, not anyone in the district. Another quote, whoever comes in wouldn't be making major changes to that strategic plan. Instead, they would be executing in accordance with the strategic plan. Final quote, we need to keep everything status quo at the schools. I think stability is the most important thing right now, and it's what's in the best interest of our district. We know we're not going to get a permanent superintendent in 2 months. A superintendent could come in here and just keep the train moving. I mean, that's what we want right now in a temporary situation. We just need someone to stabilize the district, make all of the employees and staff feel comfortable while we hire a superintendent that will be permanent. One of the things I was saying when I was saying working with boards is I also thought it's important to have maybe parliamentary expertise or experience, Robert's rules, that kind of thing. So I took all of that into consideration as I'm looking at the two candidates. I'm thinking, what has the board said that they have wanted? Nowhere in there did the board say they wanted a change agent. Nowhere in there did the board say they wanted innovative structural change. And in my conversations with both candidates, I know that Dr. Savage is out of the gate going to recommend major changes to the org chart. And on the other hand, Dr. Cartwright was looking at examining the strategic plan and determining the impact that COVID has had on that strategic plan, not changing the structure of the organization, but looking at the plans that are already in place to determine what needs to change with regard to specific goals under each prong of that plan, so to speak. So again, as I took the Chris Patrica out of it, to me, Dr. Cartwright emerged as the leading candidate based on what the board has said that they wanted. The way I look at this is sustainable change in an organization of this size takes far more than 6 to 9 months. If we hire an interim that applied on the basis of change, I think we're signaling to the community that we don't have any intention of this person being an interim. We actually intend to make this person a permanent, because it is impossible to accomplish the kind of change that was suggested to us in a 6 to 9 month period. So to me, that does 3 things. It signals to the community that the potential applicant pool will now shrink because we've brought in a change agent instead of someone who has a proven history of being able to serve as a superintendent. We want the superintendent to serve for longer than 6 to 9 months. It cuts the vast majority of the community out of the permanent search process, because if ultimately that change agent becomes the permanent superintendent, none of what a national search firm would do in terms of engaging various groups of stakeholders would take place, because we would ultimately name that candidate as the permanent superintendent, and it goes against everything that this board has said that we wanted in an interim superintendent. So I'm just going through and making sure I'm covering all of my comments. On the job training, I don't think it's something we have time for. If we are truly appointing an interim, we have a candidate who has been a superintendent and has the parliamentary experience and has the experience of working closely with the board on a day-to-day basis. Everyone I talked to at FSBA last week regarding Dr. Cartwright was very, very positive. Quotes, incredibly smart and capable, is definitely ready to lead a large district. And this one was most impactful to me. I would hire her back in a heartbeat. Those are the things that people in Orange said to me. When I spoke with Dr. Savage's colleagues, both locally and across the state, those people across the state, Ms. Vaughn, that you referred to, they all said that he has tremendous potential. He has tremendous potential to be a change agent, but he's not ready yet. That was the overwhelming feedback that I received regarding Dr. Savage. James Stevens, from what I understand, I mean, Dr. Savage did a fantastic job there. James Stevens was an F school when it was a K through 8 school. And if you remove the K through 8, I'm sorry, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade test scores from that school, which occurred before Dr. Savage took over the school, it was no longer an F school. It was a C school if you look just at the K through 5 test scores and data. So I understand it went from an F to a B in 1 year, but as an elementary school, it was a C school that went to a B in a year. I wanted to discuss the public's concerns regarding the newspaper articles that have been sent to us. I've read all the articles as well, and it's kind of funny to me. I've told you before, I don't put a lot of weight in those newspaper articles, and it's funny that the public does, because there's this outcry against fake news and the general unreliability of that's inherent in modern news coverage. But I got some background on that. It's my understanding that parents wanted schools to open. Principals did not want schools to open, and rather than have those frank conversations in each community surrounding the schools, the principals sort of pointed the finger at the superintendent. There were no issues in terms of board relationships with the superintendent. And finally, the last thing that concerns me is stability for staff. You know, are we going to bring in a change agent now and then bring in another change agent in January? What does that do to staff? I know it would be very, very difficult for staff here at the district to deal with that kind of change over and over again. But whatever happens at the district ultimately trickles down to the schools, trickles down to teachers, and then ultimately impacts our students. So I want you all to know that I think that Dr. Savage is fantastic. I think his future is incredibly bright. But when I look at what we as a board said we wanted, I believe that Dr. Cartwright comes out ahead in that analysis. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Vice Chair Vaughn?
Okay, to piggyback off what Ms. Patrica just said, first of all, at least two of us here, Ms. Gittens and myself, said that as we were going through the process that we really changed our mind on several things. And so it's easy enough to cherry pick some comments that we may or may not have said exactly in that way, but that's listening to people. It's when you listen to people and you change your mind. And again, part of what I did was I paid attention to all the people that wrote in about the superintendent choice. And as I said, some of them just said, we prefer Dr. Savage, but others elaborated on why. And there were some other comments that from very compelling letters. Secondly, it's easy for, I actually met somebody when I was at the graduation at Gateway Charter High School, a man who had worked in Orange, and I asked him, and And he just said, he wasn't very enthusiastic. He just said, oh, well, she was well regarded. I'm sorry, FSBA is not making this decision. We're making this decision. And I don't think that considering Ms. Patrica's is the president of that organization, you know, you can always find people that are going to say what you want them to say. And I don't agree with he's not ready, that comment. I mean, who's making that comment? Who's to judge? We are the people choosing. And it's logical that, and the word change agent has been thrown around here. I don't believe that that is how Dr. Savage came across, as I'm just going to turn everything upside down. It's, I recognize issues in this school district, and I'm going to do my best to deal with them. I think we have already established as a board that the person that we choose as an interim is not someone that we are choosing for a permanent, for the job permanently. I think Dr. Savage is eminently qualified to look across our different divisions. Again, I said he's a guru with data and understanding budgets, and has actually cut budgets in his own operations department. I think also the mindset, the culture of this district is and has been for a long time. We've always done it this way. And as much as things are, and I'm going to say fine, they're not world class. And we haven't lately, in my opinion, had the kind of leadership that we need at the helm. And so I think that Dr. Savage is a perfect example of someone who can hit the ground running. He knows the issues. He's not going, I mean, there are guardrails. He's not going to be able to wholesalely just change everything and set everything topsy-turvy. That's not happening, but I believe that he can and will make some changes. And as far as changing organizational chart, that's been something I've been following as long as I've been on the board. And quite frankly, there's been a dearth of leadership in getting those things changed. I've asked about it over and over and over, and we have not had the kind of leadership from the top that we deserve in this school district. And I'm going to bring it up one more time, the fact that as a board, we never had that discussion in looking at how we felt about Dr. Atkins' recent leadership. When you have, and all I'll say is when you have an evaluation where 4 people rank the head of this school district as a 2 or a 1, with 1 being the lowest, needs improvement, or I forget what the one, not effective or ineffective, something like that, and 3 people say highly effective and nobody says effective, and yet that's what it averages out to. There's a problem there, and there needs to be some changes. And again, there are guardrails, and I don't believe that Dr. Savage is going to turn things upside down. There are guardrails, and as far as parliamentary experience, We have a very capable board attorney, and it's been my experience that the superintendent has, an intelligent person will have enough knowledge of parliamentary procedure, and if he or she does not have that experience, a smart person knows where to ask, and a smart person knows what to do. And I think parliamentary experience is really low. So that's how I feel about those comments.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Gittens and then Mrs. Giovanelli.
Yes, just very quickly, I kind of have a little bit of angst about the terms, the terminology of change agent. And I want us to remember that Dr. Savage has been in the district for some time. He's been here at the district office for some time in various positions. And some of the things that he has talked about, I've spoken with him before this all came up. He has looked at, well, if we do this, then, this will get better. And the best way to explain it is, if you're a car company and you have a truck, each year they make changes to those trucks, but there may be small things. But there's something that, the truck's still going to go straight down the road, or the train is going to be on the track, but they're always looking for ways to make it more aerodynamic. If it's more aerodynamic, you're going to save on fuel, you're going to save on a lot of things. And that's the way I look at what the interim and what Dr. Savage would be able to accomplish, not stopping the train, not changing the wheels on it, not changing anything, but just making us more aerodynamic. How can we continue to roll forward as the school district that we are, that is looked at by across the nation as one of the leaders? How can we become better? How can we become that A school district? And it's not starting all over again, but it's making aerodynamic changes or adjustments. So I just want to put that out there, that it's not, throw out the baby with the bathwater type thing, at least not in my impression. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Giovanelli.
Thank you. So I too was wanting someone from outside initially, and then during the process, that changed my mind as well. Dr. Cartwright was a lovely lady, and I think that actually we probably could use her in our ESE department, so that experience, I agree with Ms. Jordan on that. But I went back through and just did my pros and cons and what I thought was important, and this is, I'm just going to name my few. Dr. Savage knows the district and the community with community recommendations. He knows the needs of our students. We are 60% minority and growing. He has the Tallahassee connection and favor. I thought that was really important. It was a key piece that not many people have. That, and I think that, to me, that was really important because we have quite a disconnect from Tallahassee, and I think it's important that to have, to be able to progress is to have that connection and ability, and I think that he has that. He also was part of opening our district during the pandemic with choices for all students. I think that was really important. He was, instrumental in those decisions that was being made. We're a large district, and he has that experience and history with the turnaround school, and knows the needs of our students. And I'm going to keep bringing that back home because it's really about our students and the needs of our students and our children. And I think that that's just so important at this time. We have summer school that's going to have 25,000 students go into summer school in our short 7 window of summer, and that's I mean, very little summer, and 25,000 of our students out of 93 are going to summer school. That's a big deal, and he knows that, and he's already been in that process of planning stages and what that's going to look like. And I think that's important, right down to what the transportation is going to be needed for that. I thought the other thing that was really, someone brought it up in one of the emails that we received, numerous emails regarding Dr. Savage, but that he was in the system and his children are going to go to school. I think that speaks volumes for me, because his children will be there. He knows the importance of that. And to have that young of a superintendent in our district that will have children in the district is just, actually it's exciting. It's exciting for Lee County, because the opportunity to have firsthand experience right here at the dais with making the decisions daily. The daily decisions are made by someone that it affects his children. So I can only hope that he would make every decision with his children in mind, and that includes everybody else's child in Lee County. So that, for me, is what sealed the deal. I really appreciate Dr. Cartwright applying, and like I said, I don't know that we don't still need her. So thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Fisher.
Yes, thank you. So after listening to my colleagues, this is wonderful food for thought, and everyone has carefully decided where the needs are. So when we say stability, and I'm kind of responding to Mrs. Patrica right now, we do need stability in our schools. We need stability for our staff. And so I don't think that what exists right now is exactly the way we need it to stay. I think some adjustments do need to be made, and some of the creative ways that was explained, like aerodynamically and all of that, is actually right on target. I think we have to consider stakeholder input, so I am hoping that before we come to any conclusion today, we will be hearing our public comment for those who have taken the time to come and attend this meeting and give their opinions, as well as all of the many communications we've had by email and phone, et cetera. We're in a phase of continuous improvement, along with the phase of continuous change. So I think that to think that we want somebody just to keep the ball rolling the way it's been would not be realistic. And I think that this board has different levels of information and insight regarding schools and what the reality is in the school level. And so combined, we bring a lot of valuable thoughts to the table, and that's the beauty of this board, is that we have a variety of perceptions and experiences that really make us potentially an amazing board of directors. I think that I had a conversation with Dr. Savage regarding the federal funding, which is not sustainable, but we have it now. And so he was talking about how to analyze those dollars and how is it being used, how are we planning to use it, what are the issues that really need to be addressed that are related to the pandemic, and what will be the return on the investment? What will be the benefit to the students ultimately? And he was really focused on that and talked about how important it is to analyze all lines of our budget and to understand the spending with the big $2 billion budget that we have. And he was very concerned with making sure that that goes back to the schools. And so that's what I've been hearing from a lot of our school leaders, is that they are looking for additional support, that they are looking to understand what is going to be next and what's happening next. So I think that he has some strategies that he shared that I think will benefit that level of our organization. And that's where the action is. That's where our kids are, and that's where our teachers and staff are, who are in the trenches and doing the work, that at the implementation phase. And so I think that he will help to bridge that district leadership staff work with the work that's happening in the schools. So I feel confident that he will be a good choice. And I just wanted to make one other comment, and I've made this comment twice before at the table, but there is no such thing as an interim superintendent. Once they take the oath of office, they are the superintendent. The average tenure for a permanent superintendent in Florida is 3 years. Historically, here in Lee County, it's been closer to 2 years. And so with the exception of Dr. Browder, who served for 7 years, and Dr. Atkins, who served for 5, that has been our history. And at a time when we had a quick turnover of superintendents who were trying things out and trying to, test the waters, then we had a lot of disruption in the schools. So I think that we need to be thoughtful as we move forward and really make sure that we have a candidate who will bring stability and deep thought and a good knowledge not only of the academic process, but of the operational process. And that's the final comment I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Gittens?
Yes, I would like to move us along if possible and ask if we can call for the consensus so that we can hear from the public at this time.
It's the point of process, and I'll ask Vice Chair, are we hearing public comment first, or are we looking for verbal consensus from the board members?
Well, if we look at the agenda, we have public comment after our discussion. But if we think of this logically, I would say that I would like to see, if there are no more comments, to hear from the public and then come back and have our consensus. I think that makes more sense.
Okay.
That's what I would like to do.
Thank you. Attorney Dupree Bruno, is that acceptable?
So for board policy 1.11, the comments are at the end of the briefing after the discussion. I think what Ms. Vaughn is saying, since the board has already had their discussion at this point, we can go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Thank you.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying.
Thank you. So Vice Chair, I'll turn it back over to you for public comment, and then once we hear from public comment, I'll ask for the verbal consensus.
Okay, I just want to make sure that at this point, we've heard from everyone who wants to make a comment before the public does. Ms. Jordan.
I would just say, to me, thank you all for clarifying what you believed was the change agent and the aerospace dynamics and all of that. I really appreciate that, because we're looking at possibly an individual who has been on equal playing fields with the other chiefs as one team. I know there is a succession plan, and he would have been in that as a chief because there really was no names. It was never really presented to us here. So to me, knowing that there was one, and part of that was the chiefs, and being one, I have to say there was a reason for that.
Okay, Ms. Giovanelli?
And I just want to add to that, you just made me think about that. That was something that was mentioned, I think, in this part of this process was some people call them chiefs, some people call them assistant superintendents. And I had to be corrected on that. So that made me think, that this is, has that status that she had. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on the board that wants to comment before we open it to public comment? Yes, Ms. Gittens.
I also want to question the statement that James Stevens was a C. I'm not quite sure about that data, so I just want to put that out there. I don't think, I recall something about that with the middle school leaving and all that, and I would just for the record like to have someone get back to us and say was it actually factual, so, because I had heard something different.
Okay, anybody else from the board? Okay, so, Attorney Dupree Bruno, would you please read the information for public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter from this meeting's agenda, only this meeting's agenda. If you completed a blue card, please make sure that we have it. If you need a card, please advise so we can provide you with a card. The rules concerning public comment are posted in the back, and comments will be made from the central microphone in the back. Please be advised that the board does not respond during public comment to remarks made by speakers. At the end of the public comment period, the board vice chair, Ms. Vaughn, may choose to address concerns or the assignment of any concerns or requests to the superintendent. Speakers and those attending the meeting are expected to act in a respectful manner. The purpose of public comment is to provide feedback on today's agenda. Personal attacks on individuals or abusive language are prohibited. In addition, clapping, hissing, and booing, unreasonably loud and/or offensive language, swearing, cursing, or a display of temper are prohibited. Speakers who fail to follow proper decorum in the chambers will be ruled out of order. Any speaker continuing with such remarks will be required to relinquish the microphone per Board Policy 1.11. The time per speaker, Madam Chair, will be 3 minutes. You will find a countdown on the big screen in the front of the room. Once your time has elapsed, the microphone will automatically shut off. We encourage you to address the board as a whole versus individual board members as they act as a collective body. I'm going to call you 5 names at a time. And Madam Chair, there are 5 speakers that will address the board.
Okay, and before we start that, is there anyone who wishes to speak who has not had the opportunity to fill out a card? Okay, so let's begin, please.
Thank you. Will the following individuals please line up? Denise Nystrom, Willie Earl Sparrow, Tara Jenner, Christine DiVigelli, Corey Dye.
May I ask a question, please? Since it's such a small group, is it possible to have them stand at the front microphone? Or is that something we must do?
So the policy at this point is that the comments are addressed at the back of the room.
Denise Nystrom. Thank you for that, Ms. Gittens. I do appreciate that. First of all, I just want to say that at any point, the board is entitled to listen to the candidates that they are interviewing, and they are entitled to change their minds. So just because you didn't choose a candidate based on maybe the exact structure that you set up in the first place doesn't mean that after listening to both candidates, you're not able to make a different decision. And I'd like to thank Ms. Vaughn for pointing that out. You know, once an educator, always an educator. I am an educator, and I love this county, and I love children. That's my life. I also love this state, and I love this country. And it all starts with what is happening in the school district. Maybe I don't know the changes that Dr. Savage wants to make, but maybe the changes that he wants to make are necessary changes. And I have heard from the community that that is what they think. Dr. Cartwright is under investigation. I sent you 5 articles. She was basically forced to resign. I don't know if that question ever got asked of her, if she ever answered that. But as qualified as she supposedly was, I think that was an essential question to be asked and answered. You know, a couple of weeks ago when you started this process, I brought up the fact that you know, you don't narrow it down to 5 candidates. You narrow it down to 10 or 15 candidates. You do another interview. It's more in depth. You do your research. You talk to board members from that district. You talk to administrators. You talk to union presidents. And I get the distinct feeling that you're like, oh, you know, here I am just telling you all what to do. No, I've had experience at this, and I was really trying to share something with you. And what ended up happening is that you narrowed it down to 5 candidates, and then 3 dropped out, and you were left with 2, one that was under investigation. So I would certainly feel more welcome if when I make a suggestion such as that you might say to yourself that this person that's standing before me has something valuable to share with me, and maybe I ought to listen, because I have said to each one of you I'd be welcome to meet with you, and I haven't met really personally with anybody. let's see. Just want to make sure I don't leave anything out. It's funny, I actually pretty much said everything that I wanted to. The other thing that I want to point out is that I know that during discussions, you talked about the fact that whoever was going to be here as an interim would not necessarily, or wouldn't be the permanent. But you know what? If Dr. Savage does a job and he brings about the change you think, you also have the right to decide that that needs to be changed too. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Good afternoon. Yes, it's 12:13. Good afternoon. My name is Earl Sparrow. I wanted to follow up from the last conversation that we had about this process and involving the public to speak. And I thank you for making the choice to hear from the public before you even do a consensus. That is the transparency that we're looking for and should expect from the board, and hopefully that will continue no matter who else is selected. My comments are as follows. I would love for there to be an opportunity for the public to speak with these candidates about what they do and their vision, because we elected you to do what you need to do to make those choices, but in the era of transparency, because you can't share everything on a website, it should be your best interest to make sure your constituents are well notified about what's going on, especially with the year that we just coming off of right now, where we have no idea who's going to have masks and who's going to do this and all this other turmoil that's going to be going on. The second thing, and I want to make sure we understand, I'm very disappointed that we have not at least hired a firm to go ahead and move forward with this new superintendent, the permanent person, because it is time. It's been over 2 months since Dr. Atkins said he's not returning. That first week should have been one of the agenda items from the first meeting since he made the announcement should have been to let's go ahead and hire a firm so we can get a nationwide search. The later we wait to do that, the weaker our candidates are going to be. Those people that are going to apply from great schools and great school districts aren't going to drop their great situation to come running here. That is not, they're already contracted. So that the delay so far is hurting us from getting a prime candidate. Unless we just wrap it up and say, I heard 6 to 9 months many times by different people on the board. But we need to go ahead and move forward before that and let them know, hey, we want to get the best candidate as possible, and the best candidate's not going to drop off in January or February and leave their good spot and come here. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. So please, I implore you, please move forward with hiring somebody and make that an agenda item for the next board so we can move forward and get the best candidate for our district. Thank you.
So just a reminder that the public comment for this briefing is limited to what's on the agenda, and what is on the agenda is the discussion of the interim superintendent candidate.
Tara Jenner. For the most part, your entire process was flawed. First off, you should have had an assistant superintendent designated who could have filled that position so that you didn't have to go through this whole rope to begin with. Secondly, some of the things that I'm thinking about is you should have had public comment to narrow down the individuals, prior to narrowing down the individuals to 5. That was de facto having no public comment, so I appreciate the modification before you did the consensus tonight. Not having alternatives or allowing additional candidates added after there was attrition was poor planning on your part. Failure by any one of you to question Cartwright specifically in public about the internal investigation that she's under is shocking. So now we're left with was the written material in the newspaper accurate or was it not? I also heard nothing about how she handled the reopening of her schools during COVID or the differences between how Florida handled the reopening with what she did. Failure to provide a written explanation for why the 3 individuals rescinded their application. No uploading of individual interview questions in your notes after the group interviews were completed. And the time of day in which the public hearings on this important hire resulted in less than transparent process. I was concerned that Cartwright seemed a bit too submissive, especially given how some of the board seemed to ride roughshod even over one another. Further, she was super in a district that had the exact opposite problem we have, namely her district had a decreasing student attendance while we have an overflow and growing community. I was also concerned that she seemed not to have a good grasp on our sunshine laws. While upon entry, she acknowledged those of us in the peanut gallery, she only mentioned parents once during the group interview, in contrast to Savage, who mentioned parents and students as significant players in the role of the school throughout his comments, and addressed his final comments to include all the community, including taxpayers, parents, and students. The concerns raised about Savage's job being vacated is moot, as he'd be in the best position to fill that seat during his superintendent stint. While I hear from Ms. Patrica and Morgan that they want Atkins, what I hear from them is that they want Atkins' superintendent role in short their agenda to continue, but with his absence. Reading between the lines, Ms. Cartwright can be controlled by them and groomed to do what they want, and Savage cannot. Savage seemed a bit cocky, but you have to have confidence to do the job that you're hiring. The worry about a change agent is a joke, as there's no such thing as an interim, just as Ms. Giovanelli pointed out. There's merely a superintendent. Given that the Florida Department of Education has said that we are top-heavy, I wouldn't see a problem with changing a few things. In the end, I'd like to say I think the whole process was flawed. Savage is the best of the two, and it also tells me that the incompetency of the board is such that we need to consider changing superintendent decisions to public vote. Thank you.
Good morning, Christy DiVigili here. I would like to mirror almost everything that Ms. Tara said, with the exception of pointing out that it was Ms. Fisher that's made that comment about, that made the comment, not Ms. Giovanelli. Other than that, though, I'm just going to be brief. Albert Einstein once said, "The measure of intelligence is the ability to change." Change is never easy, and it is rarely the popular choice. But choosing to keep things the way they are, just because it's easiest, is the absolute worst way of looking at making this important decision. I do not envy your position today. It is I know how difficult it is. As neither candidate, in my opinion, is the right choice for Lee County. Yet, here we are. So I will give you my 2 cents. I believe Ken Savage is the person that you should choose. He has a vested interest in our district and is prepared to make changes, not just sit by and keep the seat next to Bruno warm. Thank you.
Let me stand back from the mic. Don't want to give anybody any headaches. Corey Dye. I'm not going to echo a bunch of things wrong. Obviously, you heard the public say it. I would just add that I hope the facilitator gives you guys a report on what maybe have gone wrong in this process, that you guys can privately, I guess, more or less get together and figure out how to streamline this. It's a tough process. I'm going to say you guys did good. Trying to work in what you did, especially the short time frame that you had to select. In that, it's going to pain me to say, but, Ms. Fisher, I think you were right. Ow, that hurts. You should have added, I think your suggestion of adding to the 2 and trying to look at that maybe would have relieved some of the burden that you guys are dealing with now. I have to agree, Savage is the person. Just great job. I hope that you guys shift and figure out how you can improve and work forward more conducive. I think you guys did a great job. Okay, there's been some nightmarish experiences watching you guys. And I think this one showed that we can disagree, we can have various opinions, and you guys work through the process. So I want to congratulate you guys on setting your egos aside and moving forward. Ms. Patrica, I think you still had good insight or points on what might be wrong or how the rest of the state is going to view us in this process. I think it's important for us to be the model for the state and continue that strong image that Lee County has. So we thank you for that input, and I hope that the rest of your board heard some of that. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I would like to thank the 5 of you who took the time to come here and listen and speak. To Mr. Sparrow, and I'll double check with Chair Jordan, the workshop at 9 a.m. on the 21st is when we're going to discuss and actually vote to engage a national search firm for the permanent, right?
That's correct. We have 4 that have since we've sent out the advertisement, we've had 1 additional came in, so we have a total of 4 search firms, and the 21st, we will be having that conversation and is scheduled to choose one at that time, so that way we can move forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So if the workshop, 9 a.m., June 21st is when we will be discussing that and hopefully engaging a national search firm so we can move ahead. And, you know, one of the issues is, as a board, and as a district, we've had a lot of things on our plate with end of the school year, which is always a busy time, adding in the the search for an interim, and now for the permanent. And yes, I know that's what we get paid for, but there are only so many hours in the day, and a lot of what we do here in terms of setting up the agendas and getting the proper people in to help us out, staff people, there's only so many hours in their days. So I think we've moved ahead as quickly as we could. Is it perfect? No. It would have been great if we could have juggled some more plates, but we are looking at it a week from today. So I'm going to turn it back to our facilitator, Mr. Cashman, to do the next phase.
So what I'd like to ask, if okay with you, Vice Chair Vaughn, we'll have each board member provide their verbal consensus. And hearing some of the language that's been used, what I'd suggest is I'm going to call for a vote based on Dr. Kenneth Savage receiving a consensus vote based on the 5-2 I shared initially. You've heard discussion from the board, discussion from the public. So what I'd like to do is we'll go down in order asking for a yes or no. Since I've also heard the phrase of I can live with it or I'll go with the majority, what I'd like to suggest, if okay with the board, that we would also look at that as a yes. So it's either yes, no, but if someone says, I can live with it or I'll go with majority, that would be a yes. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
And that is the rules with regards to consensus.
Perfect, thank you. So with that, what I'm going to ask for is agreement. Dr. Kenneth Savage would be chosen as the interim superintendent. I'll start with Mrs. Morgan.
No.
Vice Chair Vaughn.
Yes.
Mrs. Gittens.
Yes.
Chair Jordan.
Yes.
Mrs. Patrica.
I can live with that.
Mrs. Giovanelli.
Yes.
Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
Thank you. I count that as a 6-1 in support of Dr. Kenneth Savage. So first of all, I would like to thank the board for all of your engagement and support through this process. Congratulations to the 2 finalists, and certainly to Dr. Kenneth Savage. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Have a hand up.
Yes, Ms. Patrica.
If I may, Mr. Cashman, who I frequently referred to as Mr. Kaufman before you ever sat at the table, you have achieved what I believed was the impossible. I mean, when you leave the table, we devolve back into, sort of an inability to function at a high level, but with you sitting at the table, we've been able to function at a high level. I am grateful to you beyond words that I have to express, and really, you've done a huge service to your community here. So I really, really appreciate you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments about that? Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ms. Fisher has a comment.
Yes,
Ms. Fisher?
and so I would like to echo that and thank Mr. Cashman for bringing his expertise and his calm to us and guiding us through this process in a very dignified manner. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Jordan?
And I just wanted to say thank you as well, Mr. Cashman, and we're not rid of him yet. So he'll be with us on the 21st as well, helping us through the search firms.
That's right.
Thank you.
Oh, well, then I take it back. Just kidding.
Okay, what I'd like to do before we entertain board member comments is I'd like to call on Attorney Dupree Bruno first, so for the public and also to kind of refresh our memory on exactly what you're going to be doing in the hours between now and our special meeting. Would you just kind of summarize that for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. So in between the 2 meetings, I will be meeting with Dr. Savage and the board chair, and we will be negotiating out the terms of the contract. Upon the draft of the contract, we will submit it to the board for a review with comments only coming back to me. And after that, we will present the contract to the public at the special action meeting.
Okay, and questions on that, Mrs. Gittens?
Okay, we have the superintendent's contract as a document. Are there, and I think I may have asked this before, and I'm not clear on what negotiables besides start date are there to the existing document, since, as Ms. Fisher said, the superintendent is a superintendent?
Right. So I'm not anticipating any major negotiables. I think that I've actually have a draft of a contract already ready to go. So we will have to input the effective date. We're going to have to discuss what will happen with the chief operating officer's position. So there's a few things that we do need to discuss, but I'm not anticipating major negotiations, if that's what you're concerned about.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just wanted to know. And I do believe I read somewhere that the start date for the interim was supposed to be Wednesday, the 15th?
So I've heard some different dates, but I think we need to allow Dr. Savage to be able to contribute to that discussion. We don't know where he is in terms of his projects, where he thinks it's a good natural starting point. I did have a conversation with Dr. Atkins, and he's very flexible and willing to work with the board, as he has said in the past. So I think we need to talk to Dr. Savage about that.
Okay, other questions for our attorney? Ms. Fisher.
Attorney Dupree Bruno, so at this time, is Dr. Savage represented by a personal attorney?
I've not spoken to Dr. Savage at all, so I have no idea if he is or if he isn't. So that's something else that I'll learn in between our 2 meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions for our board attorney regarding her work on negotiating the contract? Okay, yes.
Real quick, so once you resolve the contract, then we come back at 4 o'clock this afternoon and we do a special meeting, and does he get sworn in then? How does that work?
So Those are all part of the things that we will be discussing depending on the effective date. So once we come back at 4 o'clock, this is some additional discussion and decisions that the board will have to make.
But we will vote regardless, that it'll be an official vote, and there'll be public comment at that time, again, if any one wants to speak.
Yes, and this is a special action meeting, so the public comment will be like our regular action meeting, so the public comment will be in the beginning, prior to the board having their formal action vote.
Thank you.
And if I may add, and limit it just to this issue in a special meeting, correct?
Well, no, the policy is very explicit. A special meeting is just like a regular action meeting.
Okay.
So individuals can talk about whatever is for the benefit of the district or what's on the agenda.
Okay. So for those of you who are planning some comments, that should be helpful. Okay, so board member comments. Let's start with Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. I have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay? Mrs. Giovanelli.
I have none either, other than I look forward to 4 o'clock.
Okay? Mrs. Patrica.
No, thank you.
Ms. Jordan.
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Gittens.
Okay, I will save the other things that I have. I just want to say, I know we'll be working with Mr. Cashman some more in a week or so, but for the most part, I really appreciate this process and the fact that we were able to get to this point. And since there will be an official vote at 4 o'clock, and that vote is based on the contract at that point will have a start date, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure why that's not official after the official vote at 4 o'clock.
The contract will be official, it'll be a legally binding contract, but we still have a process in terms of when to swear him in. I don't know, again, I need to talk to Dr. Savage with regards to the effective date, when he's going to start. I don't know, because I have not spoken to any of the candidates until I'm going to do that for the first time after this meeting.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because as you know, after the election and everything, then there's the swearing in. So all of that process will have to take place as well.
I just hope then, for one caveat, that we get that done sooner than later, since we need to move on.
I will say this, Ms. Gittens, we have absolutely, well, I shouldn't say we, the board has absolutely no choice but to make sure that it gets done sooner rather than later, because June 30th, Dr. Atkins will be gone. So, and he has no options to stay past June 30th, so it will be resolved between now and then, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, and did you have something else?
No, I'll hold it. Thank you.
Okay, only, Ms. Morgan?
I have none.
Okay, and the only additional question is, I'm assuming that we cannot swear in Dr. Savage until after the 30th, because we can't have...
No, so depending on when his start date is, if he starts tomorrow, then we'll have to make the arrangements to have him sworn in. If he starts on the 30th, we'll have to make the arrangements. So it really depends on the start date. It's not, because Dr. Atkins is flexible.
Okay, well, that's what I was asking, because obviously, when we have school board elections, there's always that period of time that, if somebody is no longer on the board, has been replaced, or that person goes until the date that, right before the new people are sworn in. So that's what I was asking, because
He's flexible. If he, if after the negotiations, it's decided that on the 22nd, Dr. Savage will begin, Dr. Atkins will finish out his term. So it really just depends on how these negotiations go.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted a little clarification on that. And I just had that question. I have no comments. Mr. Cashman, do you have any additional comments for us?
No additional comments, thank you. I've enjoyed the
No,
process.
you weren't as bad as I thought you'd be, or,
Are you digging for a compliment here, if I may?
joke. You have to have a little bit of humor with these things. All right, so,
Could you please just thank the people who did send in their applications and resumes for us in the beginning?
why don't, go ahead, you,
Okay, I just really want to thank all of those, the 30 people who, or 31 people who actually took the time to send us their resumes and their information. I really appreciate that. Taking it down to the 10, taking it down to the 5, and then finally taking it down to the 2. All of that took your time, and we just definitely appreciated it.
yeah, and I'm glad you thought of that, because we all appreciate that. So, seeing no additional business, we are adjourned, and we will be back here at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.